before I get to introducing our awesome guest, just a little bit about me and about Fuckup Nights Toronto. So again, my name is Marsha, and I'm the founder and director of Fuckup Nights Toronto. And Fuckup Nights Toronto is part of a global speaker series, Global Community. We started out in Mexico City. There was a group of 4 friends, 4 entrepreneurs who were sitting around drinking some mezcal, and they got to talking about their fuck-ups. And it was honestly the most honest business conversation that they've ever had. They felt like they learned so much more from their failures than they had talking about their success. So from there, this movement started growing. It became this little underground thing throughout Mexico City. They were gathering their friends in bars, chatting about their fuck-ups, and just learning along the way. And people were coming in from different parts of the world. They were seeing it and asking how they could bring this concept to their own city. So fast forward to today, Fuckup Nights happen in over 330 cities, 80 countries all over the world. We've been in Toronto since March of 2017, so just over 3 years. We've done monthly events at Shopify where we bring together a really awesome community of people and speakers from all different walks of life, different types of entrepreneurs, professionals, creatives, you name it. Everybody sharing their biggest fuck-ups and their lessons learned. Now that we're coming to you from Facebook Live in these days of COVID, we've decided to change up our format a little bit. With our normal in-person monthly events that some of you have been to, each speaker would get 10 minutes and 10 images to share their fuck up. Today, I feel like nobody really wants to be looking at something that looks like a webinar, something where, there's slides up there, the speaker sharing images. So we've revamped their format for these days, and we're doing something called Fuckup AMA, where we're letting an entrepreneur really dig deeper into their story. We're diving deep into their lessons and really sharing how they had the resilience to get through their fuck up. So welcome to everybody who's joining. Would love to see where you're joining from in the comments below. Let us know where you're watching from. I also want to say a huge thank you to our lead partner, Zero Accounting. So these days, if you're an entrepreneur, your cash flow is one of the most important things that you need to be watching. It's really like we hear so many fuck ups through our talks of, accounting fuck-ups or not knowing where your cash flow is at. So Zero Accounting is an online cloud-based accounting solution. It makes accounting super easy for your business, and it really lets you focus on things outside of that and really on the things that matter in your business that are going to help you move it forward. So we're going to post in the comments. They're offering an awesome free trial that you could do, and yeah, definitely check it out. So without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce our speaker today. So her name is Salima Visram. Hi, Salima. And she is a social and e-commerce entrepreneur. She's originally from Kenya. She's done so many cool things throughout her journey. She's the founder of SAMARA and also the Soular Backpack. So Salima, thank you so much for joining us today and being willing to share all your fuck-ups.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we do something a little bit different with Fuckup Nights. I don't like to read out a bio of our speakers. We are going to post it in the comments just so you can refer to it. But we love for our speakers to just tell us a little bit about themselves and introduce themselves with a fun fact. So Salima, can you introduce yourself and tell us something that we're not going to find out about you online?
For sure. So Marsha already said I grew up in Kenya. But other than that, my fun fact is that I've probably never finished a whole season of a TV show. The only one has been Prison Break. But other than that, I can't watch TV because I can never just sit down and completely focus my attention on a TV show.
That's so funny. I have friends that have the same problem. It's like hit and miss. Like I have to really be into it, then I could totally binge it. I love that.
I'm working on it though. Yeah. I'm trying, especially with quarantine now. I'm finding that I wish I could like TV more.
I hear you. Actually, if you're watching, drop in the comments below what show should Salima watch? What do you think?
Yes, please. Something similar to Prison Break, because I loved Prison Break.
Yeah, that was a really great show. Awesome. So before we start diving into your fuck-ups, just want to mention that this is totally an interactive session. We're going to do a Q&A at the end. So please, if you have any comments throughout for Salima, drop them into the comments here on the Facebook Live, and we'd love to answer them as well. and I'll remind you a few times throughout as well. Awesome. Okay. So I think a lot of people are really interested how an entrepreneur actually becomes an entrepreneur. So how did your entrepreneurial journey start? What was sort of that decision process to actually go into entrepreneurship?
I think for me, I came from a family of entrepreneurs, so it was just the only thing I knew. I actually started my first little business when I was 12, and it was my parents had bought me a jewelry making kit for one of my birthdays, and I just started making jewelry for everyone I knew, and I'd exhausted. Like I remember my mom being like, "Okay, you've made me enough jewelry now, so what else can you do with this excess inventory that you have, or this like surplus of jewelry that you've made?" Um, and so I ended up just taking all of that and spending my Saturdays and weekends just making jewelry, and I would sell it at a local boutique. And one of my earliest memories, I really laugh about it now, is because it was at this boutique, and every free day I would go to that boutique and kind of just always hang around the cabinet where my jewelry was displayed to kind of show people that I was interested in this jewelry, because no one knew I was making the jewelry, but I wanted people to think that I was attracted to this jewelry, and hopefully they would be attracted to it too, like trying to see what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
So that was my first actual just um, deep dive into it. But then I started another company while I was in university at McGill in 2015. And then I just kept going. And I think with entrepreneurship, you just have to do it. I think you don't have to think too hard about it. Anyone can be an entrepreneur, and everyone has it in them. So it's just about just trying your luck and having fun with it too.
Yeah, I think that's been such a key theme throughout our talks that like the hardest part a lot of the time is just starting. Because I think
Totally.
everybody has great ideas and what sets I think an entrepreneur apart is just like a starting, just like getting going, not overthinking it, not trying to make it perfect, but just doing something to start. And
Mm-hmm.
then like resilience and having a growth mindset, because as we're gonna get into it, there's obviously going to be a lot of fuck ups along your journey if you're doing something new and you're doing something different. So tell me about the start of the Soular Backpack. What inspired that business and what was your vision for it in the early days?
So like I said, I grew up in Kenya. I grew up beside a village of 22,000 people who all live below the poverty line. And from a really young age, I knew that I was extremely lucky to never go a day without food or water. I knew I was really privileged to never have to worry about my basic needs just being met. Um, and so I went to McGill to study international development because I thought that I could get a job at the UN after, and that's the best way to create change in the world. But I was wrong. I think after my third year at McGill, I was like learning a bunch of theory that I felt didn't really make sense in the real world. Like I think you go to school like believing that you can learn how to be something, but it's also about how you use that education to or apply it in the real world. So by my fourth year, I was really bored with my classes, and I remember taking a class in social entrepreneurship in my third year, and I loved it. And then in my fourth year, I was like, I don't want to like take these classes anymore because I feel like I would rather use this year to work on something, taking all the knowledge that I've learned so far. So I kind of convinced my professors. I convinced three professors to let me work on this idea that I had in exchange for credit. And right before I graduated, I didn't know whether they would like that credit would actually go towards my degree. So I didn't know whether I would actually get that degree. But it all ended up working out. And so in my last year, I wanted to solve the problem of kids not being able to do their homework every night. And that was a big reason why kids were not able to get into secondary school. And then the cycle of poverty would just be perpetuated because they would go into things like child prostitution and human trafficking because they didn't have a way to earn an income. Um, so I noticed that a lot of kids were using this thing called kerosene, which is a carcinogenic jet lamp or jet fuel that 1.2 billion people rely on as their only source of light. And so I was like, and families that are living in poverty are spending 25% of their income on this. So I was like, there has to be something that we can do that can kind of take this problem and find an innovative solution. So I remember talking to all the solar companies, the top solar companies, and they all said that one of their biggest problems was that a lot of kids were not getting the lamps that they were creating because the parents would use it for themselves. And so the first idea we came up with was a solar powered pen. And I spoke to an engineer and he was like, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. So I was super excited about that. And I was like, okay, I guess that's not going to work. So I kind of went from a solar powered pen and then like solar powered t-shirt and solar powered shoes and just like 11 things, and then came to the idea of the solar backpack, which is essentially a backpack with a solar panel on it. And a child walks to school every day. It charges a lamp inside their bag, and when they come home, they can do their homework without kerosene. So that was basically the story of solar.
I love that. That's such a brilliant idea, and it's such a great way to sort of contribute and to make a difference in the world. So tell me about the early days of that company. What did it look like actually, manufacturing this product, marketing it? What were some of those initial steps that you sort of had to take to bring it to life?
It was definitely pretty challenging. I think even in the first like 2.5 months, I was like, we need to raise money. And I went into a crowdfunding campaign. Like I literally decided on a Sunday that we would launch a crowdfunding campaign on the Wednesday after. And
Gotta move quick.
but then like looking back, I mean, I think we got really lucky and we ended up meeting our goal. We ended up raising $50,000 in that month. But at the same time, I realized after that usually crowdfunding campaigns have all these algorithms and people prepare for them for like 6 to 8 months, if not more, in advance. And there's ways to make sure that you meet your goal, which I didn't know. And so it was really, I think that was my first lesson in that, yeah, you can take huge risks and you can figure it out. And it usually works out if you're just willing to put everything you have into it. Like it would have been easy for me to go to an agency and be like, how do I run this campaign? And I would have had to pay like $15,000 to them to help me figure that out. But I think there's ways to just figure it out on the way. So the early days were definitely just putting yourself out there in every way, and just taking whatever comes at you. Production was definitely a challenge as well, because at the beginning we just took products that already existed. So we took a lamp that already existed and a panel that already existed and a backpack that already did. And over the last 3 or 4 years, we've really like gone back to the drawing board and created things from scratch based on all the feedback that we've gotten from the kids that are using it and the families that are using the bags. We've also moved production now to Kenya, which we're super excited about because it means that like employment is created on the ground. And that's one of our biggest goals, even with SAMARA now. And yeah, I mean, I think we ended up working with Disney to distribute the backpacks across East Africa, and that went really well. But ultimately I realized that it's one thing to create a product that can create impact, but if you don't have a sustainable way to kind of financially support it constantly, it's very hard to always keep relying on donations. And so that's what made us start the second company.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, and we'll definitely jump into the second company as well. But this is Fuck Up Nights, so you've had so much success with both companies. But I know that in those early days of the Soular Backpack, when you were getting your first big shipment ready and working with the manufacturer, there was quite a few fuck ups that happened there. Do you want to share your story and tell us a little bit about what happened?
So the biggest shipping fuck up that happened was actually with SAMARA. So I can dive right into that. So SAMARA was basically a company I started 2 years ago, and we're a 100% cruelty-free fashion house. We design everything for the minimalist, and it's our goal to use really sustainable and innovative materials. With SAMARA, like the hardest time for us was basically when I had stopped taking a salary for the first year. And over that summer, I was like, we're going to put everything we have into this this purchase order of our inventory for holiday season, because we were really gearing up for first holiday season and we wanted it to be super big. And I went in with a lot of naivety. And so we took pre-orders over the summer. We had everything set. We worked with our suppliers to create the inventory, and they had everything ready on time. And so they were ready to ship it. And in September, they were like, okay, we've shipped it. Here is your tracking number. And we paid for courier shipping, so express shipping, which was the most expensive, but we're like, we don't want to risk anything here. So it was our biggest inventory order at that time. And we waited a week and we were like, okay, it's on the way. And then it never showed up. So we started wondering why. And we got in touch with a supplier, and she was like, well, this is the tracking number. This is what the company gave me. So we reached out to the company and they're like, well, this tracking number doesn't exist. It's not in our system. And so at that point we had literally I had put everything I had into that inventory order. And we had taken our customers' pre-orders. So we had to fulfill orders somehow. We had no inventory. This was getting to the end of October. So warehouses were reaching their cutoffs for holiday shipping. So we couldn't get a warehouse to take our inventory in, even if we had it come late. And at that point, I was just like, I don't know how we're going to keep going with this, because if we had to get more inventory in, we had to take a huge loan to fund it, and there would be shipping delays to our customers. So at that point, I think that was the hardest month of running SAMARA, because I still don't know how we kept going during that time. And we ended up taking a loan, having to purchase another round of inventory, had no idea where this big inventory order was, because at that point we were just no one was giving us answers. I ended up having to contact the shipping company's VPs on LinkedIn, trying to be like, you guys need to figure out where my order is or where my shipment is. And yeah, we ended up then, no warehouse would take us. And I ended up turning our apartment in Toronto into a mini warehouse. We hired 4 women to come and help us package stuff all day, all night for 3 weeks in December, which was holiday season and the midst of the busiest time of the year. And we somehow made it through, but that was definitely a big screw up.
That's a crazy story, and kudos to you for having that hustle to get through it and just do literally everything in your power to actually make it happen. Do you think there's anything that you could have done differently to avoid that? Was it something on the communication side with that supplier? If you could do something differently and give yourself advice before all of this happened, what would you do?
I think when you're small, you're kind of doing everything on your own, right? And I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a choice to hire or to have help with the operations or the supply chain side of it. I do think in that case, it was the freight company's fault entirely. And then 3 months later, they called us and they said, oh, we found your shipment and it was in a US customs bonded warehouse in the US somewhere. And we had to pay $8,000 to get it released, because there was all these storage costs on top of everything and at that time, $8,000 was a lot of money for us. So I think something that taught me was that sometimes there are things that are just entirely things are going to go wrong. And even now, that was our first holiday season, and this 2019 holiday season was our second. And I was we're never going to let that happen again. Things like that are not going to happen. And there were just other issues that came up, right? So I think at every step, there's going to be problems and there's going to be issues. And it's just about how fast you can move on and bounce back from them.
Yeah, that's so key, and I'm really excited to get some of your advice on how you did that. Just a quick reminder to our community that's tuning in, don't forget that you can ask questions as well. Just comment with your question down below, and we're going to do a little Q&A at the end with Salima. So I know you've had obviously like other fuck-ups that have come up through Samara and through running the Soular Backpack as well. But before we get to that, how do you sort of facilitate that resilience to get through those challenges and to really like I think like separate yourself from the failure and just like learn from it and keep going?
Well, I think for me, like, I think I don't see failure as an option. I think it's this mindset of like, you have to do it. And failure is just a part of the process. And a failure is just an attempt that didn't work out. So it's about just like, you're gonna have multiple attempts that don't work out. And even throughout the process, there's gonna be things that go wrong, but it's not a failure. I think it's a setback, and it's something that, okay, like this door didn't open, let's try the next one. But I think inherently, if you know that there's always going to be a way, even if there's 10 doors that don't open, one will.
For
And I
sure.
think keeping that in mind is super important, because even on the hardest days and on the hardest nights when you're like, I really don't know what's going to happen, I think just knowing that there is always a way.
Yeah, there's either like always a way, or I mean, you know, sometimes we've had stories where there wasn't.
Mhm.
You come to a point where it's just like not viable anymore, and also like being able to
Mhm.
recognize that and sort of separate yourself from the company or the project
Totally.
over
But
it.
maybe that's not a failure, and maybe that's just like a sense of redirection onto something else, and that's just one of the doors that didn't open.
Yeah, so true. So I think for any e-commerce entrepreneurs that are tuning in, a really big theme is, you know, working with suppliers, getting your product produced and, you know, shipped and all of that fun stuff. I know that you've had quite a few other challenges. Do you want to share a little bit about what some of those were, some of those fuck ups, and then any advice that you have for e-commerce entrepreneurs that are tuning in?
Yeah, I mean, I think we deal with them on a daily basis. Like, I remember when we started the company with $500 and a production run of 25 bags, and that's when I was like, okay, we're actually going to do this. And those bags sold out overnight, and so we placed another order. And at that point, this was when we just started, so it was right around Christmas of 2017, and there were a lot of people who were waiting on their orders. And so I was in LA, and I had no logistics set up. I had no like I knew nothing about what it meant to take or to get products and ship them out to customers. So I was visiting a friend in LA. I was like, please let me use your apartment. It was like Christmas Eve, New Year's, like that whole period. And I was just sitting on his floor like all day, all night, just like packing these boxes, and all my friends helped me with it. But we ended up getting the shipment, and I looked at them, and all the straps of these like 100 bags were attached on backwards.
Oh my God.
And so I was like, what do you do in that situation? So I messaged our supplier, and she's like, well, yeah, like some customers like them on backwards. Like some people ask us to have them on backwards. And I was like, there's absolutely no way that's true. And so we had to get them remade, and she reshipped them to us. And even just like it's taken a lot of figuring out. And I think that's something that I'm realizing now too, that even if you look at where we were 3 months ago, we've made so much progress. And I remember walking to USPS with literally like truckloads of boxes in the US, trying to ship one package at a time. We didn't have a FedEx account set up. We didn't have anything at the time, right? And as you grow, you realize how much progress has been made along the way just because you keep going. Another mistake we made was there was a time when we we got a shipment, and all of our bags, the logo was kind of longer than it was supposed to be, so it was stretched out, so it didn't look like our logo. um, and so things like that happen quite a bit. Most recently, we had this literally happened a few months ago, where we had this material that we've been trying to get for over a year now. And we finally got it. We paid the deposit. We almost got into production for it, and then realized that it was the totally wrong material. And it was just like one letter of a difference that kind of could have set us off on like a whole other path, which we would never have expected because we had done all the marketing material for it. We got a video specifically made, or we were getting a video specifically made to tell the story about this material. And we're so lucky that we caught it on time. But yeah, things like that happen all the time. We were doing our largest production order last year of 70,000 bags, and we had printed sleeves to go on all of them as their packaging. And we saw a picture of it because our supplier just sent us one, but all the sleeves were kind of printed on backwards, like right to left instead of left to right. And we had 70,000 sleeves. Luckily, we used recyclable material, so we could get them recycled. But yeah, it's just, I think as we grow, we're also trying to minimize that margin for error, but
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Just like the number, like this is still a fairly young company. And also like we should mention, like for anybody who missed in the bio or didn't see the event description, you've grown this company to a 7-figure company. So it's like, it's doing incredibly well. And it just goes to show that, like fuck ups happen, but they're almost like you have to just like keep going and moving through them. I'm really curious about that fuck up with the material. I mean, I remember seeing the marketing materials around it on your website. It looked so cool. It was marketed at, what was it? It was ocean trash, right? It was like,
yeah. So we actually hadn't put up any marketing on it, luckily. We almost mentioned it on like an Instagram post, and we kind of took it back before we could, when we caught it. But now we're in production for that ride material. And so we waited on the launch. But it's things like that could delay launches and could mean that a product gets pushed out 2 or 3 months later, or however long it takes to produce it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's you're really lucky that you caught it in time. Is there anything that you think you could have done differently to communicate with the suppliers? Like, have you switched suppliers at any of these points, like given some of these things that have happened, or is it just like constant communication and trying to improve?
I think it's a bit of both. I think as we're growing, we're also trying to we've been able to find factories that work with some of the brands that we look up to the most, like Lululemon, and just factories that we know are really good at what they do, and kind of share the same values as we do. So that's been really good. Just kind of, it's crazy because when you start with a really small factory, and that it also reflects on, they're still extremely skilled and they have great craftsmanship, but as you grow, you realize how different factories require different things at those different levels. So the factory we're working with now is requiring a bill of materials, which means that everything that we produce with them requires this detailed document of what material we need, where it's coming from, what the contents are. And it's cool to see us getting to this level too, because when we first started, everything was like through a WhatsApp message. And it was like, please make us this bag. And I would kind of sketch it out on a piece of paper and send it to them. And now we have someone on our team creating the tech packs for it and making sure that all the measurements are properly indicated so that there's literally no chance of these errors happening. Or now when we place the next order, it's going with the bill of materials to make sure that we don't have that screw up again.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. How has your business been impacted during these days of COVID-19? What have been some things that happened, and how are you getting through it?
I think in a way, I always see hardship as a time when like good things can come out of it. And I know it's an incredibly hard time for a lot of people. But there is also a chance to connect with people in a way that we haven't before. There's a chance to really grow our sense of community and our relationship with our customers. So we're really finding that our customers are even more willing to be a part of that community right now. In terms of how it's impacted us, one of the craziest things that happened was we just started growing our team, and we just we hired Kira, our director of ops, and my sister joined us a few months ago last year, and we have 2 interns on our team now, and we finally got office space at the beginning of March, and we had to sign a 4-month lease. So we've paid for the last 4 months, but after 4 days in the office space, the lockdown happened. So we've spent a total of 4 days in person together. So that's been really interesting, because I think like we had this idea of being in an office, and we've paid for it, and we have a really pretty looking space, but we've not been able to use it. And so it was definitely not an ideal situation, especially because as a young company, it's a lot of money to pay 4 months of rent without having to use that space. But yeah, I think it's just been a good time to really sit back and reflect on what's next for the brand. We have a lot of cool new products coming out that kind of go well with what everyone is feeling right now and what our team is feeling. And we really feel like it's been a time where we've been able to design things based on what we think we need, rather than just putting things out there for the sake of it, which we've never wanted to do and hopefully never will have to do.
For sure. Yeah, that's really tough. That's crazy timing with that.
Yeah.
It's great to see that you guys have found ways to, still keep moving forward, of course, and, bring the team together in different ways and really innovate within your product line, and also to give back to the community. I've seen some awesome initiatives from you guys there as well. So that's super cool. Tell me a little bit about your support system in terms of like when you go through failure. For some of you watching, you might have been at our 1-year anniversary where Salima's partner Khalil actually shared his Fuckup story. So your partner is also an entrepreneur. How does that dynamic sort of work, and how do you guys lean on each other through failure? And also just what does your support system look outside of just him?
I think it's really nice to have him because he understands like the highs and the lows of it, and he kind of leaves me alone when I need to be left alone, and he's always there to kind of bounce ideas off of. My family is also extremely supportive. I feel like my dad is super level-headed and super just practical and rational about things, so that helps a lot. And then I think also a good network of friends is super important, but also a really strong network of female founders. That's been incredible, and I think we're all going through the same thing, so it really helps to have a few friends who kind of are in the female founder network and who kind of understand the highs and the lows and kind of are going through the same thing with you. That's been really, really good.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so key. Like I found that, like I've heard like hundreds of fuck up talks at this point, and it's usually the people that have a really strong support system, or just, people that they could lean on, other entrepreneurs, where you can really, share your story and they could relate to it on that level where it becomes a little bit like, I don't want to say easier to get through failure, but it just becomes more manageable in some ways because you've seen other people go through it. I think that's the beauty of having those sorts of support systems, really just being able to lean on people through your hardship. So we'll get into a few of the Q&As that came through from some of our community. So Lipsio, sorry if I'm pronouncing her name wrong, has asked how has being on Dragon's Den helped you in moving forward? So I know you were in Dragon's Den with your first company with the Soular Backpack.
Yeah. So we actually didn't end up taking the deal after we got the deals on TV. I mean, it was great for publicity and it was a great opportunity, but yeah, I mean, I would definitely do it again with SAMARA, and it's definitely our goal to do it again, hopefully this year or maybe next year. But yeah, it's great for publicity. I wouldn't deny that at all. And it's just a nice way to also meet people because it's a good network of entrepreneurs and people who've been on it and companies who have too. So
yeah,
if you have a chance to do it, I think anyone should do it.
Absolutely. That's such a dream to get on. Do you have any advice for actually like in terms of applying to be on there? Anything you did to sort of stand out?
I think for us, well, I did it with Soular when we were still a not-for-profit. So I think it was a bit tricky just because um, it was it was a lot harder to measure just our growth based off of our revenue. But I feel like with Samara, it's been a totally different experience where we've been profitable since day one. And so just being aware of what your value prop is and what your unique, what makes you unique, and you're willing to really back that up. And also, ultimately, I think they want good TV. So don't be afraid to to spice things up if you need, and if you just everything that they say, take it with a pinch of salt, and just just enjoy the time that you're in there.
Yeah, that's great advice. We should actually, if we can find it, we have some of our team members moderating the Facebook chat. We can find your video. It was a really cool episode, and it definitely did get dramatic at
Oh
certain
my
points,
gosh,
but
it was.
I love it. It was a really great pitch though, and you like absolutely killed it. Okay, a few more questions have come through. So Netta has asked, I'm curious to hear about how your friends and family reacted to your ideas and journey, especially during the early days of your companies. That's a really good question.
I think in the early days, it's people will say, yeah, you should do it, or you should do things differently. But ultimately, like the first few weeks and the first few months, you kind of just have to follow your gut, and take people along the journey with you. My family and friends were really supportive, and they were, I mean, Khalil came with me to the photo shoots, and he was almost like a co-director at the time of like, oh, but the purse is this way. And the first photo shoot we had was like in our apartment, and he was taking the pictures. So I think it's really nice to have people that can go through like the beginning with you also, because those are the times where you're trying to figure things out and be as scrappy as possible. And I was really lucky that I had people support at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Were any people sort of like, I don't know, like judgmental of the idea, or just judgmental of the fact that you were like branching out on your own and you weren't following a path of, getting like a safe corporate job or something like that?
I mean, I did have the whole like, oh, you should get experience, not from my family, but just from like people that I would meet or extended family saying it's better to get experience before you start a company. Why don't you go work for 2 years or 3 years and come back and then like take everything you've learned and do your thing. And so before I started Samara, I actually applied to Aritzia. And I was like, maybe that's true. Maybe I need to learn a little bit about the industry. And so I ended up getting a job at their head office. And for some reason, I was just like really opposed to taking a job, because I knew that I couldn't find a job at that time that would give me the flexibility to like lead the life that I wanted, that would enable me to be in Kenya when I wanted to be with my dad, or to just, I think I'd also been through a lot with just losing my mom and Khalil going through his illness at the time. And I was kind of in a place where I was like, I want freedom to be able to build a life that I want. And I didn't find that any job would have given me that at that time. Maybe I didn't look hard enough, and I'm sure there's amazing jobs that would let you do that. But none of them fell onto my plate. And so during that time, I ended up applying to Aritzia. I almost took the job, and that same week was the week where I put the handbags online and our designs, and we sold out of those bags that week. And I kind of told Aritzia, I need a few months to kind of just think about the option that they'd given me, and then I never went back.
That's fantastic. That's so great to hear, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, like people who are deep down entrepreneurs, they end up listening to those voices, and they end up like going into that job and almost like kind of like suffering, and just like, I don't know, as an entrepreneur, it's like you can't breathe sometimes in that type of situation. Like you just need to be doing your own thing, and to have
I also think that like we're lucky that in our 20s, I mean, personally for me, I feel very privileged that I didn't have a family that was relying on me. I didn't have kids. I kind of thought of it as the time where I do get to fuck up and I do get to make mistakes. And I think it's fun to put yourself in that position and say, if I could mess up with anything right now, like what would it be? Because this time is also never going to come again, where you don't have that much, or especially for me, and I assume for you too,
Yeah.
that just we're young and we can take these risks.
Absolutely. Yeah, for if it was similar for me in that like I kind of had that realization, I think when I was like
Mhm.
25, I almost had like a quarter life crisis in some ways where I decided to leave my corporate job behind
Yeah,
and like move to a different country and like experience something totally different. And that was sort of the catalyst for, starting Fuck Up Nights and starting on the path that I'm on now. So definitely anybody who's listening, who's, in that stage of your life, like not to say that you can't do it later. I've
yeah,
seen like amazing people, become entrepreneurs when they're in their 60s or like there's no like end date to it. But when you're young, it's definitely like the easiest time for it because there's
totally. And I think something I wish I had known at the time was, I think the first year was extremely hard for me, just financially. And I mean, I had a great support system, but personally for me, it gave me a lot of worry that I didn't have a steady line of income coming in, and I didn't have my own savings to rely on. So in that situation, I think if I were to do it again, it would be cool to maybe have a part-time job or have a job and start something on the side, and then let your side hustle kind of take over once it's up and running. I think that's also a really good way to do things.
absolutely, that's a great way to go about it, and you get to
Mhm.
like, test that out more slowly and sort of mitigate some of that risk for sure.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. There's a great question that came through from Lita. How did you go about finding a manufacturer and suppliers when you first started out with Samara?
It's funny because just yesterday we were building out, my sister and I were building out a list of all the factories that we now are in contact with and that we know. And it's crazy because a year ago my biggest challenge, and I remember spending so many, maybe even a couple months, being so overwhelmed by the fact that I was like, I have no idea how we're ever going to be able to be a fashion company, and find all these factories that manufacture for the brands that we love, because we know that their quality would be amazing. And what helped us find our best factories was actually LinkedIn. And so doing a bit of research in terms of like, what are the top clothing factories, or what are the top manufacturers in the leather space if you're doing leather, and then kind of working backwards and following up with them on LinkedIn, getting advisors at companies that you look up to. Like one of our first, I guess my first mentors with Samara was a lady called Michelle, and she was from Sage. And she helped us so much with just like that initial bit of advice. And we ended up getting a partnership with Sage because of her, and our product was in all of Sage's stores last summer.
Wow.
And people like that they're honestly angels. And like in my life, I think of Michelle as someone who was like pivotal in our journey so far. Um, and even finding one person like that can lead you in so many of the right directions. And don't be afraid to reach out to them via LinkedIn, or if you know someone who knows someone. A lot of times they're more than willing to help.
For sure. I found that in my journey as well. And it's really amazing, like just some of the people that you can sort of bring into your journey as advisors or
Totally.
as mentors, you'd be really surprised. As long as you reach out in a way where, you're just like you're being really clear on what you're looking for, and you're also like in a way trying to offer some kind of value back, like you're not just
Mhm.
taking from them. How did you go about reaching out to some of those people and identifying who those mentors and advisors are going to be?
So I've always felt that like putting yourself out there in every way, like don't be shy of it. I actually found Michelle through a pitch competition I did, and someone there was like, "Oh, I think you would like really benefit from talking to Michelle." And so a lot of times, like it's things like one tweet or someone seeing that one tweet that kind of opens up like 5 or 6 doors after that, or just being at an event that you'll find people, and not being afraid to go up to them and be like, hey, like I would love to grab a coffee, or I would love to just chat with you for 10 minutes. But then also like being able to connect with them in an authentic way. And I think there's nothing that replaces that genuine connection. And it's not about only getting value from them. And it's really like, how can you also bring value to them? And how can you really take them along this journey with you and prove to them that like you are in this to actually build a great company, and you are in this to build something big, and they should want to be a part of it also.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so key. Just, being authentic and really like demonstrating value up front for sure. Great question from Arvind. How did you go about finding an engineer and suppliers and tools to start a business when you studied a non-business program?
So that's a question that I get a lot. Even when I wanted to start Soular, actually, so many people were like, "You're not even an engineer. How are you ever going to do it? Like, are you really the right person to do this?" But what we found is, especially now, like even 2 years ago, I would have said everyone should know how to code.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of like, well, there's so many people who are experts at that. Why should you spend time? Like it's good to know the basics of it, but to become an expert at everything that you want to do is really hard. And at every aspect that is involved in your business or in your company. And so what we did was we worked with other engineers. We still work with like even our web developer, like we don't have that skill set to kind of code up our website or make changes on our website. So I mean, we just at the beginning with Soular, we had someone helping on the engineering side. And because it was a not-for-profit, we got a lot of volunteering support and volunteering help and people willing to give their time. And a lot of people are willing to do that. And I think that's the beauty of also working towards a social cause and really having that in your DNA as a company and as a brand, is that people are willing to give their time and their support towards building something like that. So that's how we went about it. Yeah, with Soular, everything was pro bono, from legal advice to our engineering support, to our monitoring and evaluation. We had some great people helping.
That's amazing. Wow, congratulations on being able to, like build those types of relationships. I think it really goes to show like just the type of person that you are and the value of what you're building. Because no, like it's not everybody that could do that. So that's really amazing. Great question from Oana. Did you take on debt a lot or a little to get started?
So with Soular, we went straight into the crowdfunding campaign. But with SAMARA, we didn't take on debt. When the whole inventory thing happened, we ended up having to take a loan, and I took that from family and friends. But no, we've been entirely bootstrapped. We started with $500 and kind of scaled it up from there, which made the first year really hard. And it was incredibly hard because everything that we were making, we were pumping it back into buying more inventory, a little bit into paid ads. And now we've gotten to a point where we can actually build a team out and do the things that feel normal now, like getting office space and that make it feel like a real company. But it's taken us 2 years to get here. And I think debt or venture capital is a faster way to get there, but it depends on how you want to do things. For us, it was really about being able to control, like our goal with SAMARA is to build this fashion house that ultimately creates impact. And we want to really create a machine to do that. So for now, we want to keep it as controlled by us as possible.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, I guess it really depends on your mission and your goals. There's, it's like we're not here to say that one way is better than the other, but yeah, that absolutely makes sense. A question from Kaneka. Sorry if I said that wrong. What's your favorite product? Is there one that if you could do something or redesign differently, you would?
I'm assuming this is from our current collection. I think each one of them is really special in their own way. We really think about why we design things, and like I said before, we never want to be a company that's just putting things out there just for the sake of it. And we're kind of trying to do fashion differently. So I think every product has a unique purpose, which makes this a very hard question. But currently, I would say probably the mini tote. I love the mini tote and I love the mini. The mini is something that I personally can't live without, and I know a lot of our customers say the same. So yeah, it's definitely the mini tote and the mini.
They're super cute. Not a question, but just a really nice comment I wanted to pass along. So Maria was saying that Salima, your fuck up stories are so relatable. Working with suppliers overseas and shipping companies is such a challenge. Really glad to hear that the story is kind of resonating with you.
Yeah, for sure. Tell her to hey Maria, message me and we can chat about it and bond over our fuck up stories.
Love that. This is what it's for, you know. Fuckup Nights is a community. We want to foster that conversation. So that would be awesome if that could happen.
Yeah.
Question from Lita that just came through. What's the process from a product design idea to a manufactured product? What kind of help did you use with the design process?
So this is another thing that touches on the point of like how could you do it if you weren't an engineer? I'm not a fashion designer either. And I think again, there's people who will help you. There's people who you can always get a freelancer, you can always get a contractor to kind of work with you on it, which is what we did at the beginning. But a lot of times it's not as complicated as people think it is. So when we first started, I would send literally like, I have a measuring tape on my bedside table because like so many times in the middle of the night or before I'm sleeping, I'm like, oh, I should just like, I wonder if we did this bag, like what this would look, what size would work. And we're fortunate to work with factories we've built this relationship with where they're willing to sample whatever crazy ideas we have. And so from a product design perspective, we kind of get these ideas, we sketch them out or draw them out. Now we've gotten to tech packs, which is a lot more technical than just a regular sketch, which I used to do. And then kind of just show the dimensions. The supplier usually sends us back a few swatches or pictures of a few swatches. So we kind of pick the material and we give them a bit of guidance on this is the type of material we want, or this is the type of vegan leather we want. And then we choose the colors, they go into a first round of sampling. I know I make it sound like pretty linear, but there's a lot of like webs in there. And yeah, I mean, they send us pictures of like different zips we could use, different zip pulls, interior linings. But we also use Pinterest quite a bit. Pinterest is a great tool for us because it's so nice to just browse different ideas, and you can kind of send the supplier like, this part of this bag is really nice, or this part of this t-shirt. And mood boarding helps a lot too. So we have like a ton of mood boards on Pinterest, just kind of throwing our ideas out there. And it's always nice to go back to it, because I think when you're in this space, you're getting inspiration from so many different places. It could be a building, it could be like a teacup that you see. And so just consolidating that all and kind of coming back to it whenever you need that little bit of inspiration has been so helpful for us.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's such a great idea. Pinterest, I feel like it's so underused and it's such a great tool. So it's really good to keep that in mind. Faria has just asked, how did you push your mindset from planning to execution? I love that question. I feel like so many people get buried in just like overthinking it and planning instead of just getting started. How did you push past that and just do it?
I think it's honestly like a roller coaster, because I feel like 2 weeks ago I was really in that planning mode, and I was like, how are we gonna get to the next step? How are we gonna like figure out our brand messaging? And I don't think there's ever a time where you've figured that out. You're constantly like in this limbo of like, you're planning for a bit and then you're in like this headspace of like, how am I actually going to execute it? Yeah. And then like, I think being in that limbo is the hardest part, because you're in that state of doing nothing. But kind of picking yourself up and just being like, just start with the little steps. And I think also in this type of industry, it's harder because it takes 6 to 8 months sometimes to develop a product. Sometimes it's super fast and it can be done in a week or two. But for the last like 5 or 6 months, we've been working really hard on certain materials and certain products that we've never tried before. And so the past 5 or 6 months have kind of felt a bit slower than usual. But now going into next month, we have like 6 or 7 products that are ready. And so it's about like balancing that out and understanding that it's okay also to be in that planning stage, and it's okay to be in that slow and that state of just thinking about things, because that's where things start.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so key. Like, I think there's just like, there's seasons to like a person's life, but also to a company. And there's times where you're like heads down, just like planning. And then other times
Yeah.
where you're just like deep into the
And
execution.
that can switch like on a week to week basis. Like one week you're going to have a week that you're just planning and you feel like nothing happened. And then a week when everything happens at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about like, because you're almost like setting yourself up for the future. And then it's like those weeks where you're doing that, it feels like things aren't really happening, but it's like you're working to make it happen. And when it does in the future, it's so rewarding to see it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take maybe one more question if another one comes up. There was one on Instagram from Jessica. Is there a book that has really impacted you on your entrepreneurial journey? Something that you would recommend to?
Yes. So I always say Delivering Happiness by the founder of Zappos. But most recently, like a month ago, I read Let My People Go Surfing by the founder of Patagonia. And honestly, that book has changed the way I think about building a company and like the reason why you do things. Because I think we're in a time where I'm going to go off like a bit of a tangent over here. But I think like in times where we're constantly surrounded by all these unicorn companies and these companies that build themselves up with a lot of venture capital funding and grow to like a billion-dollar company in 3 to 5 years. Where there's a lot of companies like that right now, and it's easy to feel intimidated by that. But reading that book kind of was just the reaffirmation I needed that it's about actually staying true to your values and understanding why you're building something, and showing that it's okay to go a little slower but also achieve great things. And really being intentional about every step of your supply chain, why you're creating certain products, the materials you're using behind them, and making sure that everyone throughout your supply chain is taken care of. Because ultimately, it's something I truly believe in, and I think that there's, for me at least, I would love to build a company that is really strong in that sense and is impacting people at every level, from the people that like create the yarn that we use all the way to the people who get the bag. So yeah, I would highly recommend Let My People Go Surfing. It's such a great book.
I love that. I'm definitely going to add that to my list. That sounds so great. Awesome. Well, I feel like that's actually a good question to end off on. Salima, any last words of wisdom, any advice to our community on failure or on entrepreneurship?
No, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been so great chatting. I think it's always so nice to kind of sit back and just talk about it and reflect on everything that's happened, because as an entrepreneur, you don't really do that a lot. So thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I would love to answer any other questions. Feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or on Facebook or anywhere really. I would, yeah, happy to help in any way.
Awesome. Salima, again, thank you so much for sharing your journey, all the fuck ups, all the hardships, and your success with us as well. And we really wish you the best of luck. Really excited